The hall inside the Hollywood studio was not just loud, it was confident to the point of arrogance. Laughter echoed behind thick velvet curtains, blending into a cloud of cigarette smoke that hung heavy in the air. Deep, dominant voices overlapped one another, cutting each other off without apology. Producers lounged back in their chairs, talking about new projects, new faces, and which ideas would turn into real money. This was not a place for dreamers, it was a place for those who controlled dreams. And in this room, value was not measured by talent but by who spoke the loudest. When Charlie Chaplin walked in, no one fell silent, no one turned their head. Because Chaplin looked like everything this room had already decided was irrelevant. He was quiet, thin, unimposing. His clothes carried no ambition, no statement. And most importantly, he did not speak. In Hollywood's rapidly changing world, that was no longer just a limitation, it was considered a flaw. The era of silent films, they said, was over. Sound had arrived. Microphones, long dialogues, powerful voices, memorable lines delivered at full volume. And Chaplin stood as the exact opposite of everything this new world demanded. At one of the tables, someone leaned in and whispered mockingly, "He's still trying to make people laugh without saying a word." A few people chuckled, another voice followed, sharper this time. "He can't talk anyway." The labels traveled faster than his name. Silent man. Old-fashioned. A relic of the past. No one openly insulted him, there was no need. The room had reached a quiet agreement that he wasn't worth taking seriously. And ignoring someone is often the most comfortable form of humiliation. Chaplin stood near the edge of the room. He heard everything, every whisper, every dismissive tone. Yet his face showed nothing, no anger, no hurt, no urge to defend himself. Some people, when they are belittled, do not react. They do not explain themselves, they do not fight back, because they understand that in rooms like this, defending yourself is seen as weakness. Chaplin understood that very well, so he waited, silently, without making eye contact. Without trying to justify his presence. This room was not unfamiliar to him, he had seen these looks before. Heard these sentences before. This is over. People want talking characters now. The age of silence is dead. This was not the first time those words had been thrown at him. But this time, there was one difference. This time, he was being given a stage. A short one. A limited one. Almost symbolic. As if someone wanted to say, "Go on. Show us one last time." One of the producers stood up. He adjusted himself as if choosing his words carefully, that the tone made his intent clear. "Everyone's time is valuable," he said. "There's no need to spend too long on ideas that don't fit the new era." He didn't look at Chaplin while saying it. He didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew exactly who the comment was aimed at. What followed was presented as a courtesy. A short scene. Very short. Just a test. One final look. It wasn't an opportunity. It was an examination. Almost a closing statement. A polite way of saying, "Let's see it," when the decision had already been made. Most tests like this are lost before they even begin because the crowd has already reached its verdict. What remains is merely formality. When Chaplin was called to the stage, there was no applause. No boos either, just waiting. Cold, distant, impatient waiting. The kind that silently says, "Let's get this over with." The time was limited, he couldn't stretch it. He couldn't explain himself, and he wouldn't speak anyway. He stepped onto the stage without bowing. Without smiling, without saying a single word. The room was still nosy. Whispers continued. Some people had already turned their backs, resuming their conversations. Chaplin's presence on stage had not yet disrupted the flow of the room, and right here at this exact moment, the kind of turning point scene in the Bruce Lee stories began to unfold. Chaplin said nothing. Because he didn't need to, he began with silence. And silence was where the crowd was weakest. Because an impatient crowd cannot tolerate silence. The longer it stretches, the more discomfort grows. The more control slips away. Then Chaplin made his first move. And without anyone realizing it, the balance of the room began to shift. Chaplin's first movement was small, almost unnoticeable. He adjusted his posture slightly, as if the stage itself were unfamiliar to him. His feet hesitated for a fraction of a second, like they weren't sure where to stand. A few people glanced up, not out of interest, but out of mild irritation. As if to say, is he starting or not? He took a step forward, then stopped. His hat tilted ever so slightly, threatening to fall. He noticed it too late. He reached for it, missed, reached again. This time too aggressively and nearly lost his balance. A quiet chuckle slipped out from one corner of the room. Chaplin froze, not in embarrassment but in calculation. He looked at the hat, then at his hand, then back at the hat again. He tried to straighten it with exaggerated care. His fingers moved delicately, almost ceremoniously, as if this simple object carried immense importance. The movement was slow, painfully slow. The whisper softened. Someone leaned forward without realizing it. Chaplin took another step. His shoe caught the edge of the stage. He stumbled, not enough to fall, but enough to turn the stumble into something intentional. He overcorrected. His arm swung too far. His body followed. What should have been a mistake became a rhythm. This time, no one laughed. They watched. Chaplin wasn't rushing. He wasn't filling the silence. He was stretching it. Every pause lasted just long enough to make the audience uneasy. Just long enough to force them to pay attention. A producer who had been mid-conversation stopped speaking. A cigarette burned forgotten between two fingers. Someone else lowered their glass without taking a sip. Chaplin's face remained serious. Almost innocent, as if none of this was planned. As if the world simply kept misbehaving around him, and he was trying earnestly to keep out. Another movement, another pause, and then something subtle but irreversible happened. The room went quiet, not because someone demanded silence. Not because Chaplin asked for it, but because everyone realized too late that they were already silent. The same men who had laughed at him minutes ago are now watching his every move. The same voices that had dominated the room had disappeared, replaced by anticipation. Chaplin had done what no speech could have accomplished. He had taken control without saying a word. Chaplin finished the scene exactly as he had started it. Quietly. No dramatic pose, no grand finale. Just a final, almost accidental gesture, his hat finally slipping off his head and landing perfectly in his hands, as if it had chosen that moment all along. He stood still, for a second. No one moved. Then someone cleared their throat, another shifted uncomfortably in their chair. The silence felt heavier now than the noise ever had, because silence, once it belongs to someone else, becomes confronting. The producers looked at each other, not with confidence but with confusion. This wasn't what they had expected. They had expected outdated tricks, slapstick without depth. A relic trying to survive in a new world. What they had just witnessed was something far more dangerous. Control. Chaplin hadn't fought the new era. He hadn't argued against sound. He hadn't tried to prove anything. He had simply reminded them of something they had forgotten. Attention does not come from volume, power does not come from noise, and presence does not require words. In a room full of men who believed dominance was measured by how loudly you spoke, Chaplin had won by doing the opposite. He didn't adapt to their rules. He exposed their weakness. They were afraid of silence. Because silence cannot be interrupted. Silence cannot be talked over. Silence forces you to listen. That was why they never saw it coming. They mistook quiet for weakness, restraint for irrelevance, and humility for absence. Chaplin picked up his hat, gave a small nod, not a bow, and walked off the stage. This time, people watched him leave. No one laughed, no one whispered, because the room understood now. The man they had dismissed wasn't behind the times, he was ahead of them.